When a player is known for changing the game every time she steps on the court, one difficult question always follows after a tough loss. What happens when an opponent finds a weakness and attacks it over and over again? That question has become part of the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark after Indiana Fever's defeat against the Portland Fire. What made the discussion especially interesting was not just the result itself, but Clark's own acknowledgement that there are areas of her game and Indiana's offense that still need improvement. Fans, analysts, and former players have all been breaking down what happened. Was Portland's defensive approach the blueprint for slowing down one of the WNBA's biggest stars? Or was this simply one challenging game in a long season where every elite player eventually faces adjustments from opposing teams? Let's take a closer look. Caitlin Clark entered the season carrying enormous expectations. Since arriving in the WNBA, she has been one of the league's most discussed players, drawing attention not only because of her scoring ability, but also because of her vision, passing, and overall impact on the game. What makes Clark unique is that defenses rarely guard her the same way they guard other players. Opponents often pick her up far beyond the three-point line. They send extra defenders. They try to force the ball out of her hands. And they constantly look for ways to disrupt her rhythm. Against Portland, according to post-game discussions and game analysis from multiple observers, one of the biggest themes was pressure. Portland appeared determined to make every possession difficult. Rather than allowing Clark to comfortably initiate offense, they frequently challenged passing lanes, applied physical ball pressure, and tried to speed up decision-making. Now, it is important to separate fact from interpretation. The confirmed fact is that Portland's defense created problems for Indiana throughout stretches of the game. The interpretation comes when analysts debate exactly why those problems occurred and whether they reveal a long-term weakness. Clark herself has often spoken openly about improving areas of her game. One reason many people respect her approach is that she generally does not avoid criticism or difficult conversations. Like most elite athletes, she regularly reviews mistakes and looks for adjustments. The discussion after this game centered around how Portland disrupted Indiana's offensive flow. Some analysts argued that aggressive defensive pressure forced Clark into situations where she could not comfortably create advantages. Others pointed out that basketball is rarely about one player, and that offensive struggles often reflect team-wide issues involving spacing, movement, and execution. That distinction matters. One common mistake in sports coverage is reducing every win or loss to a single player. Basketball simply does not work that way. Even the league's greatest stars depend on teammates, coaching adjustments, and overall team execution. Still, the reason Clark remains the focus of these conversations is because she touches the ball so often and serves as the engine of Indiana's offense. When opponents successfully disrupt that engine, the entire team can feel the impact. What exactly did Portland appear to do effectively? First, they worked hard to limit easy transition opportunities. Clark is particularly dangerous when she can push the pace and create before defenses get set. When opponents force Indiana into more half-court possessions, every action becomes more difficult. Second, Portland seemed committed to making Clark work for every touch. Fans watching the game noticed how frequently defenders stayed attached to her, even when she was away from the ball. Third, reports suggest Portland focused on physicality without allowing the game to become reckless. WNBA defenses understand that Clark is capable of hitting deep shots and making spectacular passes. Allowing her comfortable space is rarely a winning strategy. As a result, many possessions became battles. But here is where the conversation becomes more interesting. Every superstar eventually faces this challenge. In the NBA, players like Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, and others have experienced periods where opponents appeared to discover a successful defensive formula. For a few games, or sometimes even a few weeks, that formula looks effective. Then the superstar adjusts. Then the coaching staff adjusts. Then teammates adjust. And suddenly the original strategy no longer works as well. That cycle is one of the most fascinating parts of professional basketball. The question is not whether defenses can occasionally slow great players down. The question is whether they can keep doing it consistently. For Clark, history suggests adaptation is one of her strengths. Throughout her college career, opponents constantly introduced new defensive schemes. Some trapped her. Some switched defenders. Some focused almost entirely on limiting her shooting opportunities. Yet she repeatedly found answers. Sometimes those answers came through scoring. Sometimes through passing. Sometimes through simply making the correct basketball play and allowing teammates to benefit from the extra defensive attention. That is why many analysts caution against drawing huge conclusions from a single game. At the same time, ignoring legitimate concerns would not be fair either. If opponents consistently discover areas where Indiana struggles, those issues deserve examination. According to recent discussions among basketball analysts, one area worth monitoring is how Indiana responds when teams aggressively pressure ball handlers. Can the Fever create alternative playmaking options? Can they generate easier scoring opportunities when defenses are heavily focused on Clark? Those questions are not criticisms. They are the natural questions every playoff contender faces. Fans are reacting in different ways. Some supporters believe the loss simply demonstrated how much attention Clark receives from opposing defenses. Their argument is straightforward. When a defense is built around stopping one player, occasional struggles are inevitable. Others believe the game exposed areas that Indiana must address if they want to compete consistently against the league's best teams. Meanwhile, some neutral observers see both perspectives as valid. Yes, Clark faced difficult defensive pressure. Yes, Indiana still has areas to improve. And yes, both things can be true simultaneously. What often gets lost in social media debates is that player development does not stop once an athlete reaches the professional level. In fact, many stars make their biggest improvements after entering the league. The WNBA is filled with elite athletes, experienced veterans, and sophisticated coaching staffs. Every weakness gets studied. Every tendency gets analyzed. Every decision gets reviewed on film. That environment forces growth. For Clark, that growth process continues every week. One game may reveal a challenge. The next game may reveal an adjustment. And the game after that may reveal an entirely different challenge. That is the reality of professional basketball. Looking beyond this specific matchup, there is also a bigger story unfolding. The increased attention surrounding Clark means that every performance receives intense scrutiny. Strong games generate praise. Difficult games generate questions. Few players in the league face that level of spotlight. As a result, ordinary basketball discussions sometimes become larger national conversations. A turnover becomes a headline. A shooting slump becomes a debate. A defensive adjustment becomes a viral topic. The attention can create pressure, but it also reflects Clark's impact on the sport. Whether people support her, criticize her, or simply enjoy watching the competition, they are paying attention. And that attention has helped elevate interest across the league. From a basketball perspective, perhaps the most important takeaway is not that Portland found a weakness. The more important question is whether Indiana and Clark can develop counters. Can they improve spacing? Can they create more secondary playmaking? Can they punish teams that commit extra defenders? Can they turn defensive pressure into offensive opportunities? Those are the adjustments that ultimately determine success over a long season. Because in professional sports, weaknesses are never hidden for long. Every team sees the film. Every coach studies the tendencies. Every opponent searches for advantages. The teams that thrive are usually the ones that evolve faster than the scouting reports. And that brings us back to Caitlin Clark. Her willingness to acknowledge areas for improvement may actually be one of her greatest strengths. Elite competitors often grow because they recognize challenges rather than pretending they do not exist. The Portland game may end up being remembered as an important learning experience. Or it may simply become one difficult night that generated more discussion than usual because of the player involved. Either way, the next chapter will be fascinating to watch. Because now that teams have seen what Portland tried, everyone will be looking for the same answer. Did Portland expose a lasting weakness, or did they simply provide Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever with their next opportunity to adapt and improve?